Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of the delicacy that exists in the corporate office today in terms of power relationships and interpersonal relationships that never existed previously, and how this is a huge drag on business, a reduction in efficiency, and all round, in my view at least, a terribly bad thing. Let's just have a look at this. Now, the reason it's come up, or I've spoken about indirectly things about this in the past, but I had a meeting with or a chat. We'd had the meeting, we were sort of going out for a coffee type thing. I went to the coffee shop just down the bottom of the building and the cafe, and I quite like this guy. He's a straight white guy. He'd be mid to late 50s, I guess, and pretty good. I've got quite a high opinion of him. So we're having a chat, and as with most situations, when you find you have sort of quite a bit in common in views, attitudes, and so on with somebody, you tend to have a more lively conversation you may otherwise. So we were talking about office relationships and things like race, gender quotas, DEI, affirmative action, and so on. He sort of accepts the inevitability of it. He thinks that it may be, coming to an end and turning full circle, but he again accepts it as inevitability. He was old enough to remember the days before all this affirmative action nonsense and DEI was around, and so he was able, as I am, to compare the office relationships that exist and the management of them and the interaction between the people, compare it today with the DEI shit to what it was like before. And so I'll just paraphrase the conversation, but basically, not all, but the majority of people, certainly in the private sector, were hired on merit. Now, the merit wasn't perfect. Where sometimes people would get in who were the chairman of the board's wastrel nephew or niece or something, sure. Would sometimes people get in, somehow they'd fall between the cracks and they weren't up to the job. Of course that happened. Were there your professional petty jealousies and so on that went on? Absolutely. So we're talking about extent or magnitude now. The situation is far, far worse today than it was then. Now, the reason for that is when somebody got hired, I would accept, somebody got hired, say, as my boss or somebody in another area that I had to work with in some way or interact with. I would accept that they were hired because they knew their job. They were sufficiently expert, qualified, experienced, capable in that field, whatever it might be, to do the job. And I didn't really question it. Some people I thought maybe were a little bit short. Some people I thought were overqualified. But most of the time I thought they were pretty much there. And I had a lot of confidence in my employers that they would hire on balance. I mean, again, not 100% of the time, and but on balance, the person that was hired was at least among the more capable or most capable of the applicants. Sometimes they wouldn't get many applicants, and in which case they would pick the best of the bunch, even though they may not have been 100% happy with it. Also, there was an attitude at the time, which seems to have gone, where they would hire people on basis on aptitude. So they said, well, none of these people actually really make the grade. None of them tick all the boxes. But this guy ticks some of the boxes, and it looks like he's really got the aptitude. He's keen, he's eager, he's bright, he's a go-getter. Okay, let's get him because he'll be a quick study and he'll sort of most likely succeed in that area. And a lot of the times that decision, and I've made those sort of calls too, many, many times. A lot of the time it works out. Sometimes it doesn't, but a lot of the time it works out. And so there was that as well. So you'd hire among the best, or you'd hire the most likely to succeed from a perspective of attitude and aptitude and so on. When I say attitude, I mean, I really want to make this work. I really want to succeed. I really want to, accomplish something noteworthy, that type of attitude. Now, not the attitude today, whereas as long as you say, I hate Nazis 10 times a day, you're considered a worthwhile person. It's not that. So this was the situation back then. There are relationships between people who are hired on merit and where each accepts that the other's been hired under such a system, those relationships are very focused and swift. Most of the meetings that I went to, those times there's a meeting, they were quick, they were to the point, they were, there was sort of clear agenda of what we're going to talk about. Not everyone, some of them meandered and went on. You'll always get some boss that wants to swagger around, like they own the universe and play tough guy. I mean, you always get that. But for the most part, the meetings were well organized, they were to the point, and they were on schedule, and they'd be, when the material stuff that you wanted to talk about was covered, that's it. Everyone would be out of the room and back doing their work and back at their desks and back at the grinding wheel and the whole thing. So now that began to change. Now I noticed the change once women started to come in, because the women wanted to gossip and talk about things that were unrelated. The women, when they came to work, they couldn't, even today, they can't, most of them, and there are exceptions, they will always, once in a meeting, they'll always treat it as if it's young girls, children playing doll's house. They can't get away from that sort of mental structure of what a meeting is. And so it's, I talk about, I talked about my pain and she talked about her pain. And then we talked about Billie Jean's pain, and those sort of that type of attitude that went on. I noticed this: the more women that crept in, the more they attended meetings. Now, I also remember that when, and this is my own direct experience. I mean, the meeting, I'm the VP of what was I the VP? Anyway, VP at this particular place, and there's all men, straight white men at the meeting, as it was back in the day, and I think there was some Danish guy or German guy at the meeting, but other than that, everyone was local born. And so the meeting kicks off, and then we're in there for, I don't know, 10 minutes, and the door opens, and in walks one of the girls, like she's from she's some junior in the marketing department or something, and now, this was before I understood what gender studies was. So she's done some gender studies thing, or a module, or a gender studies. Got it. Now, I don't know. I didn't hire her, but so she came in, and so I stopped. So somebody was whoever the guy was talking about, whatever it was. And this is like a very engineering, technical type meeting. It's not some airy fairy stuff. And she comes in and she sits down with this sort of, you can tell she's very nervous. And so I asked her what she's doing here. Why have you come in? So, have you a contribution to make, or why are you here? And she's got a faraway look in her eyes and a strange sort of half grin, grimace, and she just sat there, eyes going back and forth. And so I asked her again, what are you doing here? And she didn't answer, just stared and said, all right, well, unless you've got a reason to be here, you're not invited, you're not part of anything to do with this, so I'd like you to leave. Again, she just sat there, and so I pressed her again. Well, why are you here? And given how nervous she was youngish, I don't know, she'd been in her 20s. I mean, I wasn't much older than that at the time, but so she couldn't say, and then she said some words to the effect of, I just want to know what's going on. Why can't I be allowed to know what's going on? Why are there no women at this meeting? And it was all engineers, and so I don't have to explain to you why they're no. And so I still, I'd like, whatever her name was, I'd like you to leave. Anyway, she's not going to budge. She's just got this weird sort of faraway look in her eyes, and eyes darting back and forth. And now, I didn't realize at the time, as far as she's concerned, she's fighting back against this is one of the early examples. She didn't say that or articulate in that way, but this is what it was. She was one of the early sort of examples of women fighting the patriarchy and fighting misogyny. If you don't let her into the meeting, even though she's got no reason or entitlement to be there, then it's a patriarchal society. If you evict her from the meeting, then you're a misogynist. So either way, I mean, she's got it sort of covered either way. So it got to the point where I had to, she refused to leave. So I had to say, look, I'm giving you a directive. Now that I don't know about industrial or employment law in other countries, but in Australia, if you as the manager give a directive, and the employee refuses, assuming it's a legal directive, you can't tell them to go rob the bank or something, but it's a legal directive that then, and they refuse to do it, that's insubordination, which can, if you want to take it to its fullest, can involve instant dismissal, like dismissal on the spot. No, I didn't want to go that far. I didn't even know who she was particularly, but I'd seen her around but didn't know who she was. So I said, okay, do you understand? I'm going to dismiss you if you do not leave the room. That's how far it got, and that's how much it had to escalate. Then, rather than actually deal with the issue and apologise or explain why she's there, I mean, it wouldn't have gone down too well if she'd gone, you know what, the reason I'm here is to break the patriarchy. That wouldn't have worked. So I think she at least worked that bit out. So instead, she just bawls her eyes out, sits there bawling her eyes out. So I went out, got one of the women in, actually her boss from her department, said, can you come in and get her and take her out? So, no, don't touch me. And so behaving like an absolute, snot-nosed fucking child. But eventually she got out. But that was her solution, to bawl her eyes out and so on. Imagine if a man had done that. A man had come and go, I want to be in there and I'm going to cry if you don't. So this was now. There was another meeting. Again, this is why minorities should. For them, again, there are exceptions, but I came in as VP into this company, and this was like the sales team, and they just started back in the day. They just started to hire women into sales roles. Which was ill-advised, I thought, and it wasn't working out well at this place that I'd arrived at. So I was in the meeting, having the first meeting, and we were all, everyone was telling me sort of what they were doing and this sort of stuff. So it was like, I think one of the first one or two meetings that we'd had there, I'd had there, and this very obnoxious woman who was a sales rep, and I could tell she was a well-known obnoxious influence there, because the way everyone sort of rolled their eyes and just looked around and looked at the floor, just fuck, will someone shut this crazy woman up? So she would interrupt people all the time, and that's just the sort of thing a man would say, and that type of thing. And so I said, hey, hold on a minute, let your colleagues speak. You'll have your turn, or she'd already had her turn, or it was. Oh, I have to call out bad behaviour. I'm being one of the only two women here. It's up to us to lead the charge for equality. That's coming out with that sort of stuff. And so I said, well, no, it's not. If you want to do that in your own time, that's your business. But in here, you're being paid to do a job, and I'm your boss, or your boss's boss in this case. So I'm asking you to allow your colleagues to speak and not interrupt, and certainly not come out with these Marxist type phrases. I knew enough about Marx back in the day to call that out. And she was very upset with this. How dare you tell me to shut up type thing, and glared daggers at me. I remember. I don't think you're going to last much longer here, I was thinking to myself. And again, the next guy would talk, and I think there was something like 12 men and 2 women or so about that. And she again would she'd go and so I asked her to stop. Will you stop doing that? She wasn't used to being told that. The previous incumbent had obviously let her get away with it, and I don't know why. It's not like she was hot, so I can't imagine that the previous incumbent was jumping her or something like that. But so, and I had to say to her, you must stop this, otherwise, I'm going to have to dismiss you. Do you understand? Do you understand what I've said? And only at that point did she realise how far it had gone, and that she was that she had a threat of being fired. And only then did she shut up, and even then temporarily. She jumped out again, so on the basis she has to call out the misogyny type attitude, and so I waited till the meeting ended, and I told her, look, I'm giving you an official warning. Next time you'll be fired. You'll be dismissed on the spot if you refuse to accept the directive. And the look on her face was, yeah, we'll see about that, buddy. Again, very defiant, very difficult. But you're a man. You're a man sticking up for other men. So this is the type of relationships that started to creep in the earlier days of affirmative action quotas and this sort of thing. So you can already see the direction things are heading here, and it's only got a lot worse. So it's a friend of mine's wife who works for some government department. They had the position came up for departmental supervisor or team leader, whatever the fuck they call it, and the quota also came. So they have to match. Each position has been matched to a quota requirement. So the quota requirement was it had to be someone wheelchair bound, and so they had a quadriplegic as wheelchair bound that used some sort of it's like a straw that they blow into to make things make the wheelchair move and this sort of thing. But they're very limited in what they can do, and but that was the quota thing. So this woman who I'm told was to be promoted to that role, because she didn't meet the quota requirement, being a wheelchair bound quadriplegic, she couldn't get the job. Or didn't get the job. Instead, they installed this quadriplegic. So you can imagine how that would shift all the relationships in the office. People have to do things for her. She's limited in what she can, and it had to be a female in a wheelchair. So these are the sort of things that have been going on. Now, this CEO, as I'm talking to him, explains to me quite well. Actually, he's quite lucid. He had, I think, quite a. I should have recorded it. I had quite a good grasp of what the situation was. And he points out that nearly every relationship in the place is built on, victimhood, affirmative action, quotas, DEI, the whole thing. But the only thing that's not allowed is merit. You can be, the one-legged lesbian. You can be the wheelchair-bound this. You can be, the oppressed such and such, and the so-and-so, and minority whatever. But you can't be hired meritoriously. So it's become almost impossible to hire someone based on merit. You can hire people based on certification. That's still acceptable. You can hire people based on, they've worked 10 years for an NGO, placard waving about climate. So there are things you can hire for, as in because they have moral merit. They've waved placards for 10 years. This makes them meritorious from a moral perspective, but it doesn't sort of mean they can do the job or any part of it. And there's more and more of this, and more jobs are created for these people to fill, even though they can't do it. So, but certification is still allowed. So if you've got if you're a certified, floor sweeper or something, whatever, you can get, but people are being pushed into this certification thing. And then affirmative action means that you have to give a certain amount of these certifications or college degrees or PhDs. You have to give them to minorities. So you then have on the other side all these people that are certified, but they've all got affirmative action certifications as well as affirmative action jobs. So no one knows what the fuck they're doing. So you can see how now if you try and introduce into this mix, and this is now supervisory up to, vice president, senior vice president level, CEO level even. If you try to introduce someone into this mix who is hired on the basis of merit, then they stick out like a sore thumb. And they create, because the very delicate balance of nearly everybody working in a company these days under the age of 40 has worked for, whether as a volunteer or an employee, has worked for NGOs, whether it's in climate change or supporting all refugees welcome, or no human beings illegal, or all this sort of stuff. They've all been schooled, they've all been radicalized through school, college, NGO system, and so on. So they all have this view that the way the world should be and must be is equal outcomes, equity, and everybody, but the thing that upsets them or cuts across that, or bursts that balloon of the idyllic utopia of equal outcomes for all, is merit. Someone comes in who actually knows what they're doing, is capable, can do it is hired based on merit and achievement and accomplishment and so on. And that then sort of threatens and undermines the delicate victimhood equity balance that exists. And he's saying that in his company, he can't actually hire people based on merit. He can only hire people based on, the affirmative action, moral victimhood, this sort of thing. And that means the relationships are very, very delicate, very fragile. The slightest thing can upset these people. A hurty word, or someone didn't call them by their proper pronoun, or this sort of thing. And just to illustrate the point, I was at a meeting some years ago where they were doing this like slide presentation thing, and there was these various paragraphs in the slide, and it was like a graphic of a finger pointing to the, instead of a bullet point, it was like a graphic of a finger pointing to the paragraph. And somebody from the equity department, this is a quanga, someone from the equity department said, well, I think that finger pointing to the paragraph looks like a man's hand. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to make that call, but they said, no, it looks like a man's hand. And they had the power, wait for this, they had the power to actually shut down the presentation in the middle of the presentation, shut down the presentation until the document was rectified. The document had to have a neuter, as in a neutral gender hand, or one that they determined was. Now, did it look like a man's hand? I wouldn't have thought so. And does it matter? But the power to shut it down straight away. It's not the power to sort of lodge a complaint to a committee, and the committee says, okay, well, if that's the way you feel, let's get another graphic for the next presentation or future presentation. No, shut down immediately. And so all these people in the room, being paid the big bucks, myself one of them, has to just go, okay, all right. And then we have to sit around for hours while they find. Actually, I had to stay overnight for that one. It was in a city, I don't know, it was 500 kilometres away from Sydney, so I had to do overnight in the hotel for that and come back the next day when the graphic was in place. But that's the power that these people have, and that's the disruptive power they have. And if you multiply that by a company of 1,000 people where 999 of them are all hired to be on the lookout for that, to be desperately looking for something to be offended by, and to be useless and incompetent as well, you can just imagine the overhead that's created for businesses or government departments or any collection of people that are trying to, or supposedly tasked with achieving something. So I brought it home, and I hope I've covered it well enough in this video. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.